Anthropic is raising at a new $170 billion valuation. Let's talk about the company and its potential. Plus, OpenAI hits 700 million ChatGPT users. Is AI video actually underhyped? And is the stock market in bubble territory? That's coming up on a Big Technology Podcast Friday edition right after this. Welcome to Big Technology Podcast Friday edition, where we break down the news in our traditional, cool-headed, and nuanced format. We have a great show for you today. We're going to talk about Anthropic's new massive funding round and big valuation. We'll also cover my interview with Dario Amodei this past week and talk a little bit about the takeaways there, where Anthropic is positioned and what the company's promise is. We'll also talk about OpenAI's 700 million ChatGPT users, a great section on AI video and whether that format is underhyped, and also the stock market rip-roaring. Microsoft joins NVIDIA as a $4 trillion company. Is it in bubble territory? Joining us, as always, on Fridays to do it is Ranjan Roy of Margins. Ranjan, great to see you. Welcome back to the show.
Good to see you again, man. I just got back from Tokyo and Taiwan, and I think I had my first AI vacation.
You didn't use AI, or you did use AI?
No, I did.
That can be interpreted in two ways.
That's true. You're right. A virtual vacation. No. This was the first time that every single bit of planning was done in ChatGPT Perplexity, even in real time, kind of talking to it. And this made me completely think in terms of, and we always talk about this, like searching as we knew it before. I really think more is dead.
Okay, great. So on that note, I just want to welcome all of our new subscribers who've come in. We have a bunch of new people here this week who have come in after listening to that interview with Dario. Just to give you a rundown of what we do here on Wednesday, we have a big flagship interview with people like Dario. Next week, Amjad Masad, the CEO of Replit, is coming on. And then on Fridays, Ranjan and I show up here and break down all the week's tech news. So we're very, very glad to have you here. All right, Ranjan, I actually thought it would be good to start this week just to talk a little bit about my takeaways after doing a couple months of reporting on Anthropic, and then we can get into their fundraising. So let me just start here. I think that Anthropic is a very impressive company. Like, the one thing that I kept coming back to when writing the story about Dario and the company is just that you have this competition coming from all sides. Competition, obviously, from OpenAI, but also from Meta, places like Google with DeepMind. And Anthropic has found a way to sort of make its way into this conversation, starting really later than OpenAI, and without the resources of the big companies. And I think there was a great quote from Eric Schmidt that I didn't include in my story. I had a conversation with the former Google CEO for this profile of Dario. And he says this, he says, "My best description of this is that it is an all-out brawl." So it's really a brawl between very well-capitalized companies, including my friend Dario's startup. The fact that Dario is in the brawl is extraordinary. And if you ask me what I predicted, if I predicted he'd get there, the answer is no. How would he raise the money? How would he get the partnerships? And somehow he did. So when I say it's a brawl, the brawl means it's the most brutally competitive market you've ever seen. And I think it is interesting, despite the fact that Anthropic has $11 billion plus in funding from big tech, that it's been able to compete in this market. What do you think?
No, I think I love this all-out brawl. I guess I'm not as surprised that Anthropic has been able to kind of compete and raise in this market because, again, from a product perspective, we were Claude boys back in the day. Claude Pro, maybe not subscribing right now, but they made that decision.
We were Claude heads and big
Claude
boys.
Heads.
Gotta
Claude
get this
heads,
right.
big boys.
These are
You're
important
right.
details.
These are I thrive on accuracy here, but I think the most impressive thing that Anthropic has done is actually pivot into where they see opportunity. We've been talking about this the last few weeks, and I'm curious kind of your takeaway after the conversation around Anthropic is making the pivot towards coding, software engineering, going after technical folks. And I think they're good. They're strong. Everything you see about Claude Code, and this is not me, which is why I'm not using it as much anymore, and I can tell. But finding that very large market opportunity and niche, and trying to win there rather than trying to do everything, I think they're pretty impressive right now.
So I think when you're not as well capitalized as a company like Meta, for instance, you have to make really strategic decisions. And I think speaking with Dario and those around him, I think Anthropic has made a couple of really good decisions in terms of where it's going to compete. really strategic areas in terms of where it wants to build its models and its businesses. So first of all, I think one interesting thing Dario said was that they are all in on the business use case for two reasons. I think maybe the first one I'll just impute a little bit is that if you're very good at business, you're going to make a lot of money, and you need money to run in this type of industry. But the thing that Dario said that was interesting is that if you focus on business use cases, you have an incentive to make your models a lot better. For instance, if you're building a chatbot, I didn't say this, but I'll just say it. If you're building a chatbot, you just need to sort of cater to the standard uses. And what he said was basically that if you make your model move from, let's say, undergraduate biology to graduate student biology level, the average chatbot user isn't going to see that. But the average business customer in, let's say, the pharmaceutical industry really will. And so that incentivizes them to build better models, and it's also good business. And I just found that to be really smart.
Well, so it's clear Dario's team model here. For new listeners,
he is the most hardcore of all on team model. But go ahead.
For newer listeners, a regular debate between Alex and myself is I still believe the model is important, but the overall product and experience actually is where you see the real differentiation. So that's interesting to me that is how they're kind of approaching this. Because remember, Claude Artifacts predated ChatGPT Canvas. Like they kind of invented that. So to me, they have innovated on the product side. So it's interesting to me that he's still all in on the model is where this brawl is going to take place.
Definitely. And it's also where you direct the model. So I asked him about the coding use case, which, as you mentioned, is an exploding use case for Anthropic. Although we'll see what happens with GPT-5, and we're going to get into that in a bit. But his answer on coding was also really interesting. And that was that, A, if we build great coding tools, all the engineers in Anthropic are going to use them. We're going to get faster as a company. And B, if you have engineers, if you provide a useful AI tool to engineers, they're going to adopt it really fast. And that's proven to be the case. So it's not just the model, it's sort of the way that you train the model and how that outputs in product. And I think that's also a very wise bet for Anthropic that's paying off.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the success of Cursor. Like the whole, epithet that something is a wrapper has always been wrong to me. The Cursor skyrocketed because it just was a better experience. It provided better output relative to the competition at the time, but overall, for software developers, it just was an overall better way to develop and code and engineer. So I think. I think that the two are inextricably linked, but I'm curious, what did you take away in terms of where Anthropic is going? And we're going to talk about the funding in just a moment. Clearly, there's momentum, but what does he really see as the future in your takeaway?
I mean, I think that one thing that's clear is that Dario, this sort of does link to the funding, believes that he's the firmest believer in the scaling laws, which is that if you add more compute data and increase the model size, you're going to get predictable exponential results. And so I think that's basically the way that they want to move, is they have some near-term business interests to get them to a point where they can build bigger models and more efficient models, and effectively trying to build a super model like I think everybody is. Like, it's one thing that's going to come up. I have MG Siegler coming on. We have MG on the first Monday of the month, and he writes this great newsletter called Spyglass. And we're going to talk about the fact that all these companies are effectively working towards the same thing. Like, call it super intelligence, call it, AGI. Effectively, they're working on scaling up large language models and adding sort of the scaffolding around them to make them useful. So I think that's really where they want to go, is they believe that they can build the models best. They want to raise the money and build the biggest and best models. And then sort of, does anybody guess what happens from there? But we've seen these predictions from Dario that he has a belief that there's going to be like real economic value there, and also some like potentially scary outcomes. He became somewhat famous for saying that AI in the next couple of years could wipe out 50% of white collar entry level jobs. I don't agree with that. Maybe that's a little bit of marketing for Anthropic, like we talked about. But I really think labor augmentation and labor replacement is going to be where their business is.
Well, after the interview, do you feel that was marketing, or did you walk away that he truly believes this, is worried about it, is trying to do something about it?
So, yeah, and I'll note it wasn't just the interview. There were 24 plus interviews that I did leading up to this story about him. I do believe that, yeah, he both does really truly believe this. He's seen these scaling laws work in places like Baidu and OpenAI and now at Anthropic. So the data that Dario is looking at all points to this continuing to improve. And in fact, like Demis Hassabis from DeepMind said, yes, scaling is really helpful, but we're seeing some diminishing returns, or the words that he used is it's slowing. And the people that I spoke with at Anthropic, like Jared Kaplan, the chief scientist there, said, no, it's not. If scaling is slowing, it's just because you're building it wrong, most probably. So I really think that they do really believe in this stuff, that this is going to continue on this exponential. I believe that's an earnestly held belief. I also think that it's undeniable that being loud about that is great marketing, because if you're like the firmest believer in where the technology is going to go, and you're talking about like, how it's, potentially like capable of bioweapons, then if you're if you're a pharmaceutical company, you're going to be like, well, I'm talking with I can't leave these Anthropic guys out of the conversation.
They're making bioweapons. I'm just trying to make the next Ozempic here.
Exactly. Ozempic Plus. Lose twice the weight in half the time. Yeah, I'm going to use AI for that.
I'm in.
But yeah, so it can be both. I really think it's both. I think everybody around who's been around them, pro or con, thinks that it's both. But I think the big issue, and this is sort of like takeaway number 2 for me, is that there's going to be an issue with inference. And running these models is very expensive. Many of the startups who I've spoken with have said that like they like using Anthropic's models, but they're down too often. As the models get bigger, right? Because if the scaling laws are a thing, the models are going to get bigger. They're going to be more expensive to run. And if they're more expensive to run, are they more expensive to use? And if they're more expensive to use, does this industry work? I think that's the big open question. Here's Dario. He says, we make improvements all the time that make the models 50% more efficient than they were before. We're just at the beginning of optimizing inference. Inference has improved a huge amount from where it was a couple of years ago to where it is now. And I think whether they're able to continue that trend of improving inference and making it more efficient, that's the key question, or another key question, shall we say here, because that if you're building for the business use case, you have to make your model fit into their ROI calculations. And that's really the bottom line.
Yeah, I think that is, the more I've been thinking about it, it has to become more of a conversation, because right now, again, most of these companies are just bleeding money right now. The economics of it, as you try to make the model more powerful and saying that's how you're going to get to the eventual productivity that is promised. But in the meantime, no one has modeled out what this costs a business or even an individual. This is like the mid 2010s when we were all getting free Uber rides. Now we're all just getting, as I was traveling around Asia, I'm sure what I was costing ChatGPT in all my searches was not what I was paying for the $19.95 or whatever it was for ChatGPT, $20 for ChatGPT Plus. So I think the economics of the industry, and you had Ed Zitron on a couple of weeks ago, I firmly stand differently than him in terms of I do believe generative AI and AI is going to completely transform everything. But what that looks like, what it costs, what cost structures look like for people and businesses, I think like it's certainly not been figured out yet.
Yeah. And by the way, like in the conversation, again, just to point back to it, I brought that up to Dario and was like, what's going on? You're going to potentially lose money on your most enthusiastic customers. And he said, well, that's going to change. And then, of course, this week, Anthropic introduced stricter rate limits for Claude Code users. So the company is real. And I think all AI companies at this point, they're trying to, or they're going to have to navigate the boundaries between it's like the opposite of social media. Social media, you want people to be like super engaged and never leave your product. And with generative AI, because it is expensive to run, you have to be careful about the amount of use you try to sort of incentivize.
Yeah, we've talked about this plenty. Generative AI is not traditional software economics. It's not like essentially zero marginal cost. It's certainly not social media, but not even traditional software. It's a completely different cost structure. It's more industrial, in my opinion, than traditional software. So, which is actually, I would say, like intellectually one of the more interesting things for me, that what the entire world is going to look like in terms of how it leverages generative AI, what these companies are going to look like. And to me, even for Google, that is actually one of the more interesting parts, that the entire business has been built around kind of like fast adoption, slow, like Gmail and Google Workspace in the past was just get it in everyone's hands and start building out more experiences and give them as much usage as possible. Whereas now Gemini is different. And you can see that in the way they're all trying to figure out how to price this stuff.
Can I say we have a pretty intense debate going on in our big technology Discord about this? There are like two sides of this equation. One side is that just get the usage and all costs will fall to zero because there's so much investment in this space. And the other is talking about how, like, you know, I'm losing money on every product I make. I'm just making that up in volume. So, you know, we will
Tale
see
old
how
as
that
time.
plays
Tale
out,
as old
right?
as time, yeah.
But I think that's one of the big open questions that I walked away with.
Yeah, no, agreed. When venture is involved, that's the eternal debate.
Exactly. All right, let me give one last quick thing. And that is that one of the main things that I wanted to go into this interview and this conversation was trying to investigate whether Anthropic's rise in revenue, we all know they've gone from like 1 billion last year. They're projecting 9 billion this year, which we're going to get to in a moment. I just wanted to know, is the thing that is buoying the revenue, is that all coding or is it broader? And I learned it's much broader. So they are working with companies in industries like travel, healthcare, financial services, insurance, companies like Pfizer, United Airlines, and AIG to implement this technology within their workflows. And it's not just coding. So I think that the fact that it is broader than coding is a bullish sign for the company.
Yeah, I mean, regular listeners will know this, to me, is the ultimate battleground, is actual business implementation and use cases and within the enterprise. And for all the talk, this is not real yet, especially for the Anthropics of the world. So I think they're clearly moving into the space. But to me, I don't know, like, they have these use cases. They're starting to build out their teams in these spaces. But on the other hand, like, does that decrease focus from the pure software development where they could win? And I think that's the question all these companies are going to have to face. They have to do everything. Again, we're going to talk about the funding in just a second, but will anyone truly, is this winner takes all, or will certain people win niches within this space?
That is a great question. So I'm curious what your answer is to that and where you would put Anthropic in sort of the ranking of these companies.
Well, no, so I'm a firm believer that no one is going to win it all. The consumer and enterprise are different. That different, like the act of software engineering is different than the act of marketing. And I'm definitely not a God model. One model will win and be able to do everything well. And that company will also have the best product for all types of use cases and for everyone. So I definitely think like that is not going to happen. I mean, we've seen in tech, like social media for a long time, Facebook dominated. Then you start to see some level of competition, but the network effects within something like social media, I think, are very different than the network effects from like scaling.
Let me ask you this. Is the risk that there are some clearly economically valuable areas of this world, and all these big model companies end up directing their attention there and then splitting the market and then just not having the return on investment that they expected? Let me just give coding as an example. Anthropic obviously has the lead in coding. It's been a good business for them. Google just brought the leadership of Windsurf in, apparently in an attempt to get better at AI coding. GPT-5, which we're going to talk about in a moment, is expected to be much better at coding. If you have these 3 multi-billion-dollar efforts going at the same market, dividing it up, is there a potential risk that like no one wins, right? Because if there's not going to be one taking all, is it possible that you just end up getting this like spoiler effect where like nobody really sees the return they want?
I think you just defined free market capitalism and competition, Alex, and I like that. I think that's a good thing. I think by no one wins, this just goes back to the question around what do the economics of this look like eventually? And to me, Mark Zuckerberg doling out 100 million per engineer, which we talked about last week and said it is justifiable. But I think we start to move away from that arms race mentality, and people have to hire sales teams and go to market teams and build good product and prevent churn. And we just get back to the normal way business works. And you started this episode saying, if you're good at business, you make money. And I think if there's ever a takeaway, if you're good at business, you make money. And I think that's what it'll come back to, rather than the idea, given the rate of competition, that it will make the idea that any one company is going to be so far ahead purely from a model standpoint that you'll have to win on the other parts of, again, like Salesforce didn't win cloud early on because it just was the best at cloud. It won cloud because it was just like a powerhouse in the rest of doing business. So I think, again, this goes back to like social, like Facebook, even Google, they created software monopolies solely on incredible software. But these types of businesses have to have the rest of the, like Google wouldn't have, without its advertising model, wouldn't have been that interesting. So it's still not, it's still going to require more.
That's right. And just as that requirement shows up, we're starting to see the stakes increase again. So this is from Bloomberg. Anthropic nears funding at $170 billion value as revenue surges. The investment is going to be, they want to raise as much as $5 billion in a new round. By the way, they just raised most recently in January. They've been in discussions with Iconic Capital to lead the Qatar Investment Authority and Singapore Sovereign Fund about participating. And then the company was generating about $4 billion in annual recurring revenue, or annualized recurring revenue, earlier this month. But it now expects that revenue could hit $9 billion by the end of the year. This is a new stat from the Bloomberg story. One thing that stuck out, Dario was like, listen, I am surprised, but we've seen revenue 10x from 0 to 100 million, from 100 million to a billion. And from 1 billion, we're now at he said 4 billion annualized, or maybe 4.5. So they're going to have to like seriously, like the run rates are going to have to look like they're in the 20s, I think, at the end of this year if they're going to hit 9 billion, because they're going to have to make up for those months that they weren't on the $4 billion run rate. But I don't know. Maybe it's possible. They're going to get the money to find out.
Yeah. What are they going to do with the money? That's, again, going back to, I'm so curious, and I know even with 24 interviews and diligent reporting, getting a true answer of how does that investment look like on a proportional level between investment on the model side and investment on the like business side, let's say, is an answer that's almost impossible to get. But I don't know. Did you get any sense around that?
Oh, yeah. I don't think it's that hard to figure out. I think it's going to go towards infrastructure and getting larger data centers.
All right, then you just answered the question. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the things that's coming up here, and why Mark Zuckerberg has been offering all this money. It's actually like a pretty smart thing. It's like, all right, well, if I'm spending, $100 billion on data centers, I'm just like throwing a number out there. Why can't I spend 1/10 of that, or 1/100th of that on talent?
Yeah. Okay. So then, if that's the case, I mean, the assumption there is you're scaling revenue solely on, virality essentially, or just like high level brand marketing by saying things like bioweapons, I guess. But to me, I guess I will say this with a grain of salt, because they have shown they're able to scale revenue already with this philosophy and this strategy. But to me, does it keep going, or at a certain point, especially at that scale, are you going to start running into the Googles of the world or the hyperscalers more regularly, versus every individual software engineer is ready to pay you $200 a month on their work credit card, versus that's a whole other level of competition.
Well, you would imagine that it would be harder to 10x every time you 10x, just because the law of large numbers comes into play. Like going from
Unless
1
you're
billion,
NVIDIA.
unless you're NVIDIA, in which case that law doesn't really apply. You just
Yeah.
substitute Jevons paradox or whatever
Yeah.
fun made up economic term you want, and you just keep printing money. But I don't know if they get to 10 billion this year. Are we going to getting from 10 to 100 billion is much harder. I don't think
No,
there's
but
any.
if they get to 10, I will tip my hat to Dario and team.
Yes, I will too. And speaking of 10, OpenAI is expected to surpass that this year, actually. So OpenAI hits 12 billion in annualized revenue, breaks 700 million ChatGPT weekly active users. This is from Bloomberg. They roughly doubled their revenue in the first 7 months of the year, reaching 12 billion in annualized revenue, says OpenAI. And I think there's this big stat. This is a big stat. ChatGPT has 700 million weekly active users. I mean, for a product to come on the market in November 2022 and potentially be on the road to 1 billion users by, let's say, mid 2026, that is insane from a company with no footprint beforehand.
Yeah, to me, the most impressive part of that is there's no entrenched virality in the product. Like, yes, there's share your conversation, which actually, I saw this post today and it was really interesting that apparently Google is now indexing shared ChatGPT conversations and they're searchable. Conversation for another day, perhaps. But
no, let's talk about that now, actually, because I found that to be kind of weird and concerning that, like, I mean, maybe because there's also been issues with like Meta's conversations showing up and you can like, there's almost nothing weirder than like getting a chance to access people's private conversations or seemingly thinking private conversations with these bots. People will say the weirdest things to these chat bots, talking about their problems, their marriage, and the fact that like you can I guess when you hit that share button, is there any clear messaging that this is like sharing to the entire? I mean, you should intuitively know that you're going to share this to the entire internet, because if you drop it to somebody else, it's going to show up. But like the idea that this could end up being blasted to indexable Google is kind of crazy to me.
Well, there's 2 points on that. One, it just kind of brings me back to I love the brawl as like Google being like, let's index that stuff, like realizing, oh, well, we'll take some of their information right now and make it available and interesting through our own platform. But I think, the other part, so again, like if you create a public share URL, it gets indexed. If you're like sharing the conversation by itself and not creating that URL, it does not. Same with Meta. There was like a big brouhaha like a month ago, and it was terrifying. Like I was going through Meta AI and seeing some really weird conversations that were being publicly posted in feed. But again, Meta even more so, it felt like accidentally hit share. But I think, but I think, so 2 parts of that. There's getting to 700 million where virality is not entrenched is incredibly impressive. But this is where still how this stuff lives in our life, especially at the individual and consumer level, I think there's so much that's going to happen and so much that needs to be figured out at the business and enterprise level, even more so. I think these things are a constant reminder from OpenAI that like ChatGPT, suddenly imagine here if your conversations that your employees are sharing are suddenly indexed. But even remember, there's a story a few weeks ago where I forget which company was IPOing and someone asked for like internal financial documents, and ChatGPT made up this entire, like I have these documents, I got them from an investor who was part of the like testing waters discussions. And then, the company denied it, that they were real. So it seemingly was hallucinated, but what's getting indexed where, what's getting trained on where, what's going to show up where, I think that there's definitely, at the speed we're moving, a lot that's going to need to be figured out.
Okay, so this brings me, we talked a lot about GPT-5 last week, but I haven't gotten your perspective on it yet since you were out. It seems like GPT-5 is going to come pretty soon. My guess is, I don't know, sooner rather than later. So what do you think about GPT-5? You're obviously the product guy, not the model guy. Are you excited at all here?
No. No,
You're like the only person who has been focused on AI who doesn't have any bit of anticipation for this new model.
I think like I don't know what step change to expect or see. The last few model releases have felt like iPhone releases for me. So I think, and again, this is going back to team product over team model, but I'm just I don't know what do you dream of or expect that will just happen that will blow your mind to a point that you're like, we've hit ASI right now. Wait, is it advanced? Have we left the advanced and now it's just super intelligence as per Mark Zuckerberg? Is it now just SI, no ASI?
No, A is artificial, not advanced. But that
Oh,
would
sorry,
probably be the
artificial.
next
Yeah,
level.
yeah.
I know
Yeah.
it's tough to keep track of all the buzzwords,
Well,
but
AGI, ASI. But do you think GPT-5 is going to be our AGI, and what does that mean to you?
well, last week on the show I said I think that once they release this, Sam Altman is going to call it AGI.
Of course,
But
of course.
I've since, I mean, maybe it happens, maybe it does, but I've since sort of taken a step back and thought about like what could be the downsides here, because it is going to be this very big swing that they've been waiting to take and waiting to release for a long time. And Sam has also inflated the expectations, I would say, quite dramatically. So clearly they think they have a better model that they're going to hand over, which is I think interesting and would be cool to see. But the other side is like maybe the expectations are too high, and people will sort of put this up as like a test for whether they're following the scaling laws and whether the improvement is as exponential or even linear. That in the way that they've been talking about. And I read a post this week by Ryan Greenblatt, who is a researcher, an AI researcher, who asked, should we update against seeing relatively fast AI progress in 2025 and 2026? It's a very simple post. He's basically saying GPT-5 is expected to be released within 3 weeks. And Ruber is focused, that is, it is substantially more focused on practical agentic software engineering. My expectation is that GPT-5 will be a decent amount better than O3 on agentic software engineering, but won't be substantially above trend. So we could end up getting a situation where we see a better model. It seems clear that this model is going to focus on an economically valuable area, which is coding. But if it doesn't continue the trend, I think we're going to see a secondary news cycle here, which is that people will be like, well, we were promised AGI. It is not following the trend. It is showing those diminishing returns. And therefore, we're going to, go all of a sudden into skeptic mode for the rest of 2025 and 2026, that things will dramatically improve from here. And so I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be like kind of a seminal moment. There's been something around the like allure of GPT-5 because it's been dangled in cryptic tweets and like code names for so long by Sam Altman that they have to deliver something magical. And agentic software engineering step up versus step change, and also seeing the word software engineering there again, isn't as interesting to me. Like, is this another Sora or is this GPT-3? I don't know. Like, I still am trying to envision, because they've never given us an idea or a picture of what it will be. And I get it that kind of helps create the hype, but by not kind of clearly defining that direction for everyone and just trying to make it this kind of like mystical thing, I think it inflates expectations too much, and I think it can certainly lead to skeptic mode.
So here's my prediction. There's going to be an overreaction and maybe two overreactions. I'm almost 100% sure that we'll see at least one and maybe two overreactions to whatever happens.
Wait, what are the two overreactions?
The first one is while we reached ASI or AGI, and the second one is like, oh, this does not actually continue the trend.
Do you think he's going to say ASI?
No, definitely not. Too early for that. I still would be maybe surprised but not shocked if they say it's AGI. But I think superintelligence is not going to be.
I don't know. Just to go after Ilya a bit, he just made his whole new startup, Safe Superintelligence.
I'd be like, well, we've released unsafe superintelligence.
USI, and we're okay with it. USI, that's the future.
Well, one thing I think may not be overhyped, because there's almost little hype about it, is AI video and the rapid capabilities that are advancing in that area. So let's talk about that and whether we're in a market bubble right after this. And we're back here on Big Technology Podcast Friday edition with Ranjan Roy of Margins, talking about all things AI this week. And Ranjan, one of the interesting things that happened this week is you and I both dropped pretty fun stories about actual progress with AI video or dreams of AI video in our doc independently. So why don't you lead with yours and then I'll tell you mine.
All right. So the first thing I had come across, and again, what you had just mentioned, the lack of AI hype in this space, I think really is fascinating. Fable Studio, an Emmy-winning startup, just raised money, including from Amazon. They have an AI platform called Showrunner. So the idea here is you pay $10 to $40 per month, and you get to create your own animated shows or build on others' existing IP. And you can do things like insert yourself as a character into the show, or actually define the entire direction of the show. I think this is incredibly fascinating because even for my son, like 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, or whenever ChatGPT released voice mode, we started doing stories, and I would be like, inserting him into it and telling me a story about a magical land and dragons and use the name John Jay. And he loved it. And I like this whole world of kind of created entertainment and what kind of opportunities and experiences it'll open. I think this is where you'll see how to use, it's one thing to just use ChatGPT and become slightly more productive in life, but to actually create these kind of things, I think, is incredibly fascinating. But the other interesting part of this, though, is Fable is pitching studios to put their IP on its own platform. And even in the article that was on Business Insider, they claim that Disney might be interested. And the idea that, will they ever give you, certainly Disney, I cannot imagine would be, but imagine having access to making my own little South Park character and then making a story around it. It seems like that kind of creative energy, that's the fun stuff that will really push this technology to the mainstream, or just create things that, would have been unimaginable before. Do you think this is real?
Yes.
And do you think it's going to work in this model?
Yes, but I will make a prediction here. And that is that people are going to say this is going to displace Hollywood. And I think this is just an entirely new category in and of itself. Because I think one of the great enjoyments of watching good entertainment is not being too involved in the creation process, sitting back and being surprised by the brilliance of the people that are creating the content that you're watching. Same with video games. Like, part of the enjoyment of video games is, not necessarily like creating your own path, is just like following the, brilliant output of thousands of game designers if you're playing something like Assassin's Creed, and not having to really worry about doing that yourself. Like, I think our brains have two different modes. We have like kind of doing and consuming, so to speak. And this type of AI creation actually puts the consuming bucket in a more of a creation place, if that makes sense. So I think that if we're going to basically transpose the entertainment side of our lives into the creation part of our lives, it doesn't displace entertainment. It just creates a new category that sits maybe right between those two.
Okay, I'm in. I buy that. I think because if you think about the entire creator economy, even the idea in 20 years ago that you could essentially create your own 2 to 3 minute TV show that would get distributed to millions of people was unimaginable. And now every single reel on your Instagram feed is that. And that's someone giving access, given tools, given distribution to do that. And so you're right, but it hasn't displaced movies. All of us watch more high production Netflix than ever before. So yeah, I think that's a fair idea that it's a different category. Maybe to me, it's almost that more it'll displace creators and or it's a new category of creator, and it'll compete with kind of influencer type reels versus it's not gonna ruin Avengers 26, but
No, it's very interesting the way that you're thinking about this, because the way that I came at this is like, are you going to want to create your own personalized stuff and watch that? As opposed to, do you want to take these tools and create derivative work that is viewed by lots of people? And that is actually, I think, more of a threat to the traditional entertainment industry than the first use case, because it is something that's created by someone else, but viewed by many. The one thing I'll say is creating content is like really hard, and you might be able to entertain yourself on these platforms for a while, but it's much more difficult to, again, like have that storytelling capability. Even if you could like legitimately just prompt a Disney movie, to have that telling capability that will sort of engage so many people. Now, maybe you wrote an amazing prompt and the AI is good enough that it can, it can be like a one-line prompt that turns into a blockbuster hit. But I'm less bullish that is something that we're going to see anytime soon.
Well, I'll add the caveat, creating good content is incredibly hard. In reality, creating content has gotten easier and easier and easier, that it's like harder to find that good content. But okay, I think I am now kind of, after talking about this, maybe this lives in that, like, you can get personalized books or engraved or monogrammed like gifts, or maybe it lives in that realm more so than having any other major impact. But I don't know. Do you know what's nuts? In 2009, Electronic Arts had a feature for FIFA where you could take a photo of yourself from like 5 different angles and upload it and create a player that actually was on the field. And this was one of my first blog posts ever, back May 2009. Deep cut, yeah. No, but it was magical. I was like on the field with Fernando Torres in Liverpool and like scored a goal and was like hugging the team, and these like pixelated faces in the background and it's crazy to me that never took off. So clearly I was in the niche and not everyone was asking for that, but I still remember that. And that's why, like, there has to be some things that are just really fun and cool and make people excited to kind of experiment and do stuff. Like, yeah, in the video game, imagine you are the player, you see yourself in there. That's kind of fun.
Let me give you a crazy stat. So streaming over the past year has been up 6%. Netflix has been flat in terms of it's the share of streaming Netflix growth has been no. Netflix has not increased share, despite the fact that streaming as a percentage of all TV or screen viewing has gone up. And the thing that is growing is YouTube. So that's maybe a counter argument to my earlier statement.
Yeah. I think even more so. Yeah, you don't have to. Still, creating good content that gets discovered and surfaced it's probably harder than ever if that's the model. But I don't know. I'm excited about this. I think like this is just going to be fun. And maybe it lives in the world of you're buying some credits and sending it to your friends and like doing stupid stuff or funny stuff or stuff with your family, and it's emotional. But I still think there's something here that's going to really define entertainment 5 years from now in ways that we didn't expect.
You might be right. And I'll just share my cool AI video story of the week. This is from TechCrunch. Google's NotebookLM rolls out video overviews. Google announced on Tuesday that it's rolling out video overviews to NotebookLM. It's AI-based note-taking and research assistant. With the new capability, NotebookLM is taking more of a visual approach to helping users understand different topics and the ideas. The feature creates new visuals while pulling in diagrams, images, quotes, and numbers from uploaded documents to explain the content. Google says the feature is good for explaining data, demonstrating processes, and making abstract concepts easier to understand. I don't think people understand how freaking crazy this product is. You legitimately upload documents, articles, whatever it is, and it will make you a video filled with like little animations and visuals that breaks down the topic you're trying to understand and like will like show it to you visually. Just the amount of it just doesn't even seem like a real product. It's crazy to me.
Well, and remember, NotebookLM kind of went viral for the first time with basically making a podcast out of the content, the text content that you feed it. And what was so like I'm just going to say incredible about it is like the inflections of, and we say this as two guys talking on a podcast to each other, like it almost made a mockery of us and everyone else podcasting, because it really felt like a podcast and two people talking to each other, and their inflection and their the pauses and the kind of language that they were using. And so that's what went viral there. So I'm very interested in what it's going to do on the video side. But to me, one of the more interesting questions, I'm really curious what you think about, is like, I saw Joe Wiesenthal, I saw a tweet around, it was like, the general trend is clear that all forms of passive media consumption are dying. Everything is some kind of conversation. With NotebookLM, you don't read a PDF, you create an AI-generated podcast to listen to, you ask questions. He's saying oral culture accelerates. Like, do you think, actually going back to our previous conversation, is passive media, I'm guessing you're going to say not dead, but so much of Instagram, I guess, has become more passive. Twitter is very interactive. Like, where do you see this going?
I think Joe is so wrong on this take for the reason that I said earlier.
Hear that, Joe?
Yeah. Joe, if you're listening, totally wrong take here. Why do people go to entertainment? It's escapism in a way. It's like, I want to just like leave my world for a moment and go into this crazy world that I would never be able to visit, except the fact that like Netflix has made this game about, like, you know, this video about the Squid Game, and I want to watch that. And that you transport yourself there. You imagine yourself as the character as you watch. You're entertained. You get like adrenaline boosts by watching these things, maybe. I don't think people are going to want to let that go.
No, but see, this is actually, when I watch now, I go to Reddit after and read threads. I like ask Google or ChatGPT in real time, who are the characters, who are the actors, and what else have they been in? You know, like, it's no longer, unless I'm in the theater, completely passive. There's always kind of like ancillary actions or activities taking place around the content, which is good, which kind of like more deeply immerses you in it. At least for me. Maybe I have attention span problems at home.
No,
I think that's a common behavior now.
I think you're right, and I think this is why our society is unhappy. Okay. Let's talk about the market. We are in the thick of big tech earnings. We have about 5 minutes left, but I definitely want to touch on it. Bloomberg, the S&P 500 is a touch away from triggering sell signal, Bank of America says. This is from Bank of America's Michael Hartnett. Overbought markets can stay overbought as greed is harder to conquer than fear. He says that 88% of the country's stock indexes are above their 50 to 200-day moving averages. When they are 88% above these moving averages, it's time to sell. Currently, 82% of them are above their moving averages, which is, of course, this technical behavior, or not technical tracking that they do of the markets. But obviously, like, it would seem like we have a lot of froth. We have NVIDIA at $4 trillion. We have Microsoft, which just became the second $4 trillion company, which is crazy. But then again, you do have earnings from these companies, and everybody's beating earnings expectations by a lot this quarter. What do you think this all means, Ranjan?
Everyone is NVIDIA now. Like, and as we speak, Meta is up 11% pre-market. Microsoft is up 9%, and these are multi-trillion-dollar companies. But Microsoft's Q4 revenue was up 18% at $76 billion. 18%. Like, I mean, having been in the business world a long time, like, hitting near 20% growth when you're a startup or you're like a mid-scale company is hard. It's hard as hell. So, like, to do that at that scale is shocking. And I mean, it makes it not unreasonable that, and when your net income and your profit margin is 24% at $27 billion, like, these numbers are nearly unfathomable, the same way I would feel when you would see those NVIDIA earnings about a year ago. So things are humming. I mean, there's no taking that away. Do you see this continuing?
Well, every time I've said I don't know if they can continue to grow, they've continued to grow. And it looks like the tariff threat is not going to be anywhere near as bad. And remember, the economy was humming coming into that. So I think that it will continue. Now, it's funny because I read
the death blow right there.
Right.
Death blow.
Yeah. Right. I read that. But the thing is that I read that headline and I was like, did the people in 2000 know that the massive growth that they were seeing was the beginning of a crash, a bubble and a crash? Probably not. But then again, the earnings are there. Like the money is coming in. And it is like the entire economy basically spending money on these services to try to get better at what they do. Right? Cloud revenue at Microsoft, I think we might have mentioned this, 39% year over year. Azure, 39%. And the full year revenue topping 75 billion. And Microsoft's cloud revenue for the quarter reaching 46.7 billion. It's real money. It's real money. So it seems like this can keep going, but maybe we're missing something.
Yeah, I think those are the only words to put it. I'm near speechless. It seems like it can keep going. Maybe we're missing something. What could we be missing? I'm curious if others have thoughts, but they're good numbers. They're good numbers, and they're not slowing down. Again, Meta as well, up 22% on top line, up 36% on the bottom line. Yeah, these are good numbers for any company at any scale, much less a multi-trillion-dollar company.
Yeah, and capital expenditures are going up across the board. Big tech is expected to spend $330 billion this year building largely data centers.
Got to spend money to make money, right?
That's right. So
if you're good at business,
if you're good at business, you make money. Yeah. If you're good at business, you make money. Folks, if I've heard we don't learn things on Big Technology Podcast. We've just, given one of the best business lessons, I would say, in the history of the show. If you're good at business, you're going to make money.
I think that's the only way to end right there.
Put this thing on masterclass. Put it in the books. All right. It's worth the subscription. Anyway. Ranjan, it's great to see you as always. Thanks for coming on the show.
All right. See you next week.
All right. See you next week. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thanks again to all of our new and existing listeners and viewers. It's always great to be on this journey with you. And thanks again for listening. On Wednesday, Replit CEO Amjad Masad is coming in to talk all about vibe coding. So I hope you'll stick with us for that. And also MG Siegler will be here on Monday for his monthly Monday spot to talk about Mark Zuckerberg's personal superintelligence. Thank you, Ranjan. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we'll see you next time on Big Technology Podcast.